Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel Philosmos, where everything philosophical is discussed. Now, today the lesson is titled "Follow the Patterns of Nature and Not Your Feelings." So, the normal purview of the average human being is to see, experience, life, and events, circumstances as occurring from the realm of randomness. So we perceive the things that happen to us as things that happen out of randomness. Uh, for example, if you're driving down the road and another car rams into you out of nowhere and you're involved in an accident, from that point of perspective, it appears as if you had no direct control over that you are not necessarily involved in that transpiring. For another example, if you're walking down the road and you come across a criminal and unfortunately he mugs you, from that perspective, it appears as if you had no direct control over that. So, this belief that we have that things occur out of randomness is actually valid because when we actually observe life from the surface, when we observe life from that surface, it presents itself in that manner that we don't necessarily control the things that happen, that things happen of their own accord. And that's why we've come across terms such as destiny and fate, because of this assumption that things happen to us that we necessarily do not control. And it is a valid belief because that is how life presents itself. But if we took another approach, if we looked at it from a different lens, perhaps the scientific lens of looking at nature and existence objectively, we would realize that there's more to it than we've given credit for. So when we look at nature, right, we realize that nature communicates through patterns. And we observe this because we objectively looked at the occurrences of nature and picked up on their patterns and then made certain assertions about specific truths or specific temporal truths, let's say. So, for example, let's look at the seasons. So there are 4 seasons that we have discovered, that there's winter, that there's summer, that there's spring, and that there's autumn. And each specific season behaves or manifests differently. So summer will be hot, warm, vibrant, and winter on the comparison will be very cold and things don't necessarily grow. And in order for us to have gathered that information, an individual or group of individuals had to sit down and dispassionately and objectively observe these patterns. They had to pick up that, okay, and this particular point in time in the year, it's warm and it's sunny and things are more vibrant, and then in this specific time on year, it's very windy, it's very cold. So in order for us to have picked up on that, we had to patiently observe the things that tend to occur through patterns. And furthermore, we realize that when we study one realm of patterns, we realize that it's intricately connected to other patterns. For example, within the context of the seasons, when we are in winter, right, we begin to realize that winter doesn't only affect the atmosphere, but it directly and indirectly affects the behaviors of organisms and animals and ultimately human beings too. That weather does not only regulate the atmosphere, but it also regulates behavior. So we begin to realize that when we study one pattern, we realize that that pattern is intricately interwoven with other patterns within existence. And we realize that, okay, certain animals actually mate when it is springtime. You see, so we realize that all these patterns are actually connected. And we realize that every aspect of nature has a pattern if we just objectively study it. So now, taking this fact and focusing it into the self now. Now we're not observing nature now. Now we're looking at the self and realizing that there are patterns within the self that enable experience to unfold in a specific way. So, for example, if you want to be successful in any endeavor or in any activity within the human experience, then you must pick up on its patterns. If you want to learn how to make more money, then you realize that there are patterns behind making more money. If you want to learn how to drive a new car or a car, you need to realize that there are patterns behind driving a car. If you want to study and become a computer programmer, then you realize that there's patterns that are involved in that in order to become a successful computer programmer. So the fact of observing patterns is fundamental within the human experience. It's something that is essential, and it's a skill that one needs to cultivate in order to successfully maneuver your way through existence. But normally what transpires within the human experience is that we create illusionary patterns in the external world that correlate with how we feel. So if I feel angry or disappointed, then I will look to my world, I will look to the external world, and I will try and identify and successfully identify patterns that correlate with those feelings. So that is what generally occurs within the normal human mind, is that we look for patterns that echo and amplify states that we carry and pre-existing ideas and beliefs. But if we took a more objective approach, if we looked at things more scientifically, then we'd realize that we are the ones that are actually modulating these patterns. But you need to be sensitive to your experience. You need to have the courage and bravery and the ability to deeply pry and investigate your experiences from the point of view of being dispassionate. Now, it is very challenging to be objective with yourself. But once you're objective with yourself, then you'll recognize the patterns in your behaviors that further recreates the experience that you are having right now. So once you become more sensitive to that, you realize that your patterns of thoughts, your patterns of feelings, your patterns of gestures and physical movements and body language all perpetuate the pattern that you are recognizing right now as an experience. But you can only discover that once you look within and discover the patterns that are within, and you realize that patterns within are directly influencing the patterns that you then call your experience. So the optimal goal for the human being is to follow the patterns of nature, is to follow the patterns of reality. From that point on, then all the actions that we take will be intelligent actions and actions that furthermore demonstrate an understanding of life. Because normally what we tend to do is that we superimpose our feelings, our beliefs and ideas on things that have a specific pattern that won't necessarily change because of how you feel about it. But these are patterns that have been existing within that field or within that experience or within that aspect of life. And that all you need to do is follow that pattern. And following that pattern is basically getting an in-depth understanding of what works and what doesn't work. What works in specific times and what doesn't work in specific times. So For example, a farmer would have to know that if I planted my seed right now in the summertime, then it has a higher probability of growing versus if I planted it in the winter time. And I'm no farmer, I don't know exactly when they plant their seeds, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point that you need to have intelligence in how you act and when you act within the experience of life. Because once you have that intelligence, once you develop that intelligence, then you recognize that there are patterns to which life exudes and expresses and reveals. And once you pick up on those patterns, then you'll be able to modulate your actions in the best way possible that will be effective and will assist you to manifest things in a way that marvels you, that inspires you to take further actions to perpetrate the patterns that you are recreating right now within your experience. So the intelligent person right now, in this point in time, is the person that has the ability to recognize the patterns within experience and then modulate your patterns, your specific patterns that are perpetrating that pattern that you call an experience. Modulating your pattern so that the pattern that you are perceiving changes to better suit, to better correlate the pattern that you are now expressing at this point in time. So you do not look to change the pattern outside. You look to change the pattern within. And the more you become sensitive to your thoughts, the more you become sensitive to your feelings, the more you become sensitive to the self-talk and to your body language and to how you compose yourself and your general temperaments, then you realize why it is that you're observing the reality that you're observing right now. You'll realize why this experience is before your eyes right now. Because you are involved in that. You are controlling that. And you're controlling that by the pattern that you're expressing on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. So if you want to be more effective in life, if you want to become a master at life, then realize that life reveals patterns. And the only way to get a grasp on those patterns is to have patience and gently observe what works and what doesn't work. And once you discover what doesn't work, don't go back and do that same thing. It's basically what Albert Einstein said. I'm just going to paraphrase it, in which he said that to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result is insanity. And that is what we normally do. We act and behave in one specific way, in one specific approach, and we expect different results. That's not how life works. Life reveals its patterns, and you need to pick up on these patterns. And once you recognize what works, go with that and evolve on that. And whatever actions that you take from that point on have the highest probability of transpiring and occurring in a way that is beneficial for you. So negate from observing life through your feelings, through your states of consciousness, because then that will only recreate illusionary patterns in the external world that will perpetrate that feeling that you have and that belief that you have. Now look at life objectively and try to discover the nature of reality and the nature of your experiences and how your experiences manifest and why they manifest in that specific way. And once you do that, then you're recognizing the patterns. And then when you pick up on those patterns, then you can accord your actions. You can manipulate and alter your actions to better suit the pattern that you have recognized. And once you understand this principle, it will transform your life. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to this. Please like this video if you liked it. Please share it if you found it valuable. Please comment if you have something to say. And to end it off, as I always end it off, for those who seek no more, for in the present we find it all. Thank you very much, guys.